For those of you who are watching online, we're just about to get started again. And there is Dr. Fauché.
Wow, Sébastien.
We are very appreciative because I can do the calculations on what time it must be there in Canada.
It's not bad. It's almost 4 o'clock. But please be nice with me. My brain is a bit foggy, I guess.
Well, thank you again to all of our panelists. I'm going to start by asking 1 or 2 questions of each of our panelists, all the same question to each one of the panelists, and then have some specific questions we have prepared for each of the panelists. And we also have some questions that have come in from the Zoom watchers. Thank you for those. And so we'll get to as many as we can. And we've got about 30 minutes here. So first, and I'll start, maybe we'll do this in the order of the that I've got here. Sebastian, I'm going to, or Dr. Fauché, I'll let you start here. So why is improving detection techniques for Legionella important from a public health perspective? Why are we spending all this time and effort on looking at detection techniques?
Okay, well, that's a great question. I think probably my colleagues will be better at answering that question. I've joined the fight and the detection quite recently. I think in my experience, the standard culture techniques that we have is actually very hard to do. For having had my people do it in the lab, it's pretty hard. So we need something that is, a more simpler, that is easier to do in the lab, that takes a shorter amount of time, and that the results are easily interpretable, which I think Legionnaires gives us the ability to do. And from a public health perspective, I think detection in water systems, and I presented yesterday a case where we couldn't find a source. I think better detection, better storage, the ability to go back in time, I think that's what's needed to really, shut down and manage, shut down the water systems that are contaminated, but also, manage the system better. I'll let my colleagues also answer.
Yes. Dr. Perot. Can you hold the microphone?
Don would be helpful too. I think if you don't measure, you can't tell if your system is a cause of disease or a potential risk for disease. And to be able to assess that, you need to be able to measure with a method that's easy, that you can do frequently, that in a complex system you can apply at various places. For example, in a cooling tower system, not one sample once a month at one point. A cooling tower system has many circuits. You have to go in different places at different periods to understand what's going on. So that's something. I also think we need to measure because we want to prevent a preventable disease. That's the base. That's the #1 reason we can. And if you don't measure, you don't know if you're managing the system as you should. Mm-hmm. This is probably the best source of COVID transmission.
There's multiple microphones. Perhaps who would like to join next? Mr. Yortani, would you like to?
Sorry, in Japanese. 感染源の特定をするのが非常に大事だと思いますので、それを取り除かないと患者がどんどんまた出てしまうというところで、それを除くことが公衆衛生上大事だと思っています。
Well, first of all, we have to make sure we eliminate the sources of infection. And without the elimination of the sources of infections, we're going to get more and more patients. So detect through the right detection method and the control, that is one of the most important things for the public safety purpose.
それで高感度な検出が必要になってくると思うんですけれども、それでレジオラート等を使うと、簡単にできるというところで、利用価値があるのかなと思います。
And from that perspective, we need a high sensitivity technique. And if we want a high sensitivity technique, here it is. The Legionella is easy and still gives us a very sensitive detection results. So that's the value it provides.
Dr. Ricci, anything you'd like to add? Or?
いかがでしょうか。何か追加されますか？
Not very much indeed, because the most important things have been said by my colleague. Anyway, I think that a preventive approach based on systems that are able to evaluate soon the risk of Legionella contamination are important to have, because as we always say, prevention is better than cure, so it is important to maintain low the risk of the contamination of Legionella. And this can be done only having a system that allow to detect Legionella in easy way, in a simple way. And unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know, we at the moment the only method that the scientific community recognize for Legionella risk evaluation is the culture, the plate culture or rapid liquid culture. And I think that we should choose at least methods that are more easy and simple to adopt and to evaluate and also to interpret, as Sebastian told before, because sometimes people believe that plate culture is the best, but there are many things that affect these methods. First of all, the recognition of the colonies. That is not easy at all. So I think that a method that doesn't imply this, does not consider this point is very important. Also because in laboratories is always decrease the capability of macrobiologists to recognize colonies, because many methods are now automatized, and I think that Legionnaires in this situation could be very useful also for this reason.
And certainly that change in the practice of microbiology for the young people coming into the labs is, I think, very consistent around the world. They're coming in with a range of different skills, but less experience in some of the plate culture work. Yeah. And Dr. Inoue, did you want to add to this? And if you like.
I speak in Japanese. もう皆さん私の言いたいことはほぼ言っていただきました。
Well, what I wanted to say, I think, has been exhausted by my colleagues here at the panel.
どちらにしても大事なことはですね、水利用設備の汚染の実態の把握、あとおよび制御の有効性ですね、そこの検証が必要です。そのためには精度の良い簡便な方法が必要ということです。
So as my colleagues here said, what is important is to understand the realities of the contamination of the water systems and to understand whether the control measures in place are really working. So in this sense, highly sensitive, good, and easy to use detection methods are important.
Thank you. What do the panelists think are some of the new research needs in this, specifically around Legionella detection? What are the next kinds of studies that need to be done? We've heard a lot of studies already at this conference, but in this spirit of preventing disease, what are some of the things that you'd like to see done? Yes, go ahead.
I think that in addition to find more detection method easier and faster, I think that is very important to, it will be very important for Legionella control also to study the ecology and the interactions of Legionella with other microorganisms inside the water system. I think that this could be a very important key in the future to control Legionella. Have been done several studies on this field. And I'm quite confident that in the future we will be more aware about the interaction of Legionella with other microorganisms that will allow to control better this microorganism. For example, we know very well that some strains of Pseudomonas aeruginosa are able to inhibit Legionella, and there are also other microorganisms that are in conflict with with Legionella, as the amoeba, of course, when it's present in a water system, is very the owner must be very worried about it. And I think that we have to fight Legionella also in this field, in this aspect, that will help for sure the control of Legionella in water system.
Yes.
Yeah, I think I would support what Maria Luisa, Dr. Ricci just said, understanding the ecology in the system. I would add one layer to that. In engineered water systems, it's not only understanding, the advanced studies focus on a few measurements in a given system and try to draw conclusions out of those. I would argue that the way we design our water systems, we have a number of niches that have their own ecology, really. We have to start thinking about understanding that and mostly how to, if possible, when possible, redesign our systems to be able to maintain these favorable, balanced communities that will not only decrease the Legionella, but other pathogens of concern. Microbacteria are important, enzymes are very important. So this balance we need to understand how to reach it, how to keep it across a complex system, not only in general, but in the areas of low flow. And I would add to that we really need to understand with lower water demand, we're all striving to decrease our water consumption. I'm seeing a lot of systems go bad because of the implementation of lower consumption, which is good and desirable, but in an existing legacy system, it causes headaches and concerns. And how to manage that, I think there's a lot of room for us to work on.
Mm-hmm. Others? Mr. Yoratan?
いかがでしょうか。
in Japanese, sorry.
日本語でお話しします。
ちょっと違う姿勢になるかと思うんですけれども、 レジオネラ実際感染源がよくわからないものが多いというところで、セバスチャン先生の発表にもあったように、感染源がわからないけど同じ ST が出たりということは私も経験しています。
Well, my answer is slightly from a different angle. But when we think about the Legionella infection, and sometimes it will be very difficult to identify the source of infection. And as Sebastian-san said, that sometimes it is very difficult to identify the source, but sometimes we find exactly the same or identical ST.
そういった時に、そういったターゲットとなる菌を選択的にうまく分離できるようなことができると、感染源を特定することができ、そういった対策につなげていけるのかなと考えています。
Then, if we can selectively isolate the target microorganism, then it will greatly help the identification of the infection source, so we can take some action against it.
Dr. Fauché, did you want to join in here?
I agree with what all my colleagues have said. I would like to add one aspect. I think is we need to start really thinking really hard about the operators that they're the one that deals with the system, and if we can make it very easy for them to do the detection, to get the result back, maybe shorten the time they need to wait between they do the test and they get the results back, then maybe we can improve management and we can limit the risk. The problem with some of those methods, the standard culture, it's very long and so on. So, I think it's only in making it easy to do an operator that will be able to improve the situation. There's also all the in situ detection methods that are being developed that could be eventually, good alternatives. The problem with molecular method is that you don't get an isolate that you can type and that you can actually match to the clinical cases. But I think we need to think from, an operator side a bit more when we think and when we talked about detection.
I think that's such a great point, because the reason we're doing this is to get out ahead of and prevent, and it's all about maintaining control and having that information as close to the source of the decision maker day by day is always going to be helpful. So I think that's an important dimension as we think about this from lots of different perspectives. Dr. Inoue, did you want to add anything?
はい、付け加えることってまたちょっと難しいんですけど、あえて言いますと、レジオネラ自体の多様性っていうのも実はまだよく分かってないところがあります。現在60種以上記載されておりますが、実際のところどれくらいいるのかっていうのもまだ分からない状態です。
Well, I don't know whether I'm adding a new point or not, but when we think about Legionella per se, its diversity is not well understood yet. As far as we know, there are more than 60 species being reported. However, that may not be everything.
で、私も今日はご紹介しませんでしたが、実際に分子生物学的手法でですね、解析しますと、培養できないようなミキサイの種のクローンがですね、たくさん取られるということを経験しておりますので、その辺も解明していきたいと思います。
Even though I haven't talked about this in a presentation today, but I have also resorted to some the molecular biological method to identify some new species. Then we have come up with some the clones which haven't yet been identified, and also which is unculturable. So we also would like to elucidate on those unculturable, unidentified species or clones.
Thank you. And thank you. There's a question here from the audience. And if you can introduce yourself, please.
Yes. First of all, thank you very much for this interesting, very interesting conference. I am Francesco Santi, and I am president of the Italian Association of Professionals working on safety and environment risk management. So I represent about 2,000 professionals in Italy that has main activity, the risk management for all the kind of risk for private and public companies. When you ask the importance of a method that is more reliable, fast, and easier to manage, is our dream, because we know companies, for example, that take care of more than 400 buildings all over Italy. It means about 7,000 tests per year, and they use 3 different laboratories in Italy. But they have to compare with other companies to discuss about it, so we can say 5 more different laboratories. And what is the problem is that if you have the same device checked by 5 different laboratories in different time, in different situation, they can compare completely different numbers. And it's very difficult to explain to the property of the plant, of the hospital, of the factory, how the results are so different. So for us, that we are working risk management, to have a system that is reliable, faster, and easier to manage is mandatory, is a dream. We need that you develop this. The main reason for us to be here is exactly to verify what is the development in this kind of future. That is our work. Thank you.
Thank you for that comment and your experience as we try and, there are many pieces to this puzzle, and the action is happening on the ground in the buildings where that water is being managed. So thank you for that. Another question there? Or is there...
Thank you, Jimmy Walker.
Sure, of course.
Oh,
Mr. Santi, I think your question is extremely valuable. The same building, 2 points in the same building do not give you the same answer. We're focusing on the methods more this afternoon. I would argue there's as much discussion as to how we sample, where we sample in a building. That is really not really well defined in regulations and guidance, and that is a mistake. We need to understand the variability through a building, and we need to understand how to measure points that represent a risk. There's general guidance for that, but it's not. I agree with you. It's too vague for. And the methods is a part of it. The sampling, how you address it, and I would argue that at the end we also need to strengthen the way we relate these numbers to risk. You have to compare who's in the building, the risk profile of the users, the devices that are present, and to compound that. There's a lot of work to be done in QMRA to understand how important. Would it be okay for a general population to have a higher number as opposed to a hospital where you're looking at negative samples as the objective? That part also is missing from the discussion at this point. Oh, your question was very good.
So if I could have a follow-up question there, as we talk about variability and differences. You have that experience in Quebec, where Quebec does monitor, at least in cooling towers, specifically for Legionella pneumophila. How has that impacted, in your experience, the risk mitigation efforts that have gone on in that province?
We are just analyzing the database of 7 years of monitoring right now and preparing papers to show this, to share this information. What we see is that the risk is driven by a small proportion of the cooling towers across a very large number, and that the monthly sampling for such at-risk system is not enough to capture it. We're also showing that Dr. Annette Guiguy's poster, how measuring at 8 in the morning, at 9, no, at midday and in the afternoon will not give you the same number as you mentioned for buildings. So what is the right number for that? So the regulatory implications are good. You put in regulations, everybody takes care of their system better. That's always good. But for the ones that are slipping out of compliance once in a while, we have found that those are really at-risk systems. And they should be taken care with much closer monitoring obligations to make sure that they stay low.
Just one issue, Michelle. Thank you very much for your answer. I would say that the definition of the profile of risk in a particular building is exactly our job. We work on this issue, in this item from more than 15 years, and we can manage it. Some companies, some consultant well, some consultant bad, okay, of course. But if you sum to this variability, the variability in the system to detect if the same water is contaminated or not, depending on 14 possible variable methods to measure the contamination, you see that the problem is is a huge. And so just to solve the problem of the detection of the Legionella in the water would be, of course, a dream for us, because then we have to take care of the plant. But as an engineer, I can manage it, okay? So I'm an engineer in love with biology because it's so much more interesting. But we need instruments. Thank you.
Thank you. And maybe we'll have our final question. It's wonderful to have the engagement at an international conference. So this is exactly the goal, have the perspectives from Japan, from Italy, from Canada, from the UK.
Thank you very much, and thank you to everyone for these seminars and presentations this afternoon. They've been ever so interesting. The last conversation got me thinking about training the samplers and who trains the samplers, and gets them to understand the implications if they don't take the samples properly and transport them properly. It has such a big impact on the actual outcome of the result. What I was thinking of was going back to Professor Edelstein's talk at the very start of the conference, and how the 1131 plate culture was developed. It was developed for the outbreak that happened and to detect Legionella pneumophila. And yet it has such, as you've demonstrated to all of us, such a number of processes contained within it. And Professor Provost, you demonstrated with the Legionella, the higher count. And I was wondering if you'd like to expand on why you think we're getting a higher number of counts from that processing compared to the plate culture.
I can rephrase the question for my colleagues to help. And it's a really good point. This is why do we have higher concentration? Actually, some people that manage systems don't find that good news. But I believe that the pretreatment that we see in the standard plate culture do decrease the number that we get. I also think that we probably pick up a couple of VBNCs that don't grow as well and colony within the given time, and that you would pick up as a signal in Legion alert. So I am not surprised to see that. I think liquid culture has been shown to have higher numbers, so that's not a surprise. But it is important to acknowledge that you may get higher values and concentrations. I think Maria Luisa, you may have some suggestions.
Yes, as I told you in my presentation, Jimmy, there are many aspects in the culture, in the plate culture method that affect the recovery of Legionella, and I'm very convinced about this because it's very easy to lose Legionella during all the process. That is very long. On the contrary, Legionella, I think that gives a better results just for also for this reason, because you do not have to filter, to plate, to concentrate, and so on. There are less risks to lose Legionella in using Legionella, and it's very easy also to use compared to plate culture method. I think this could be the reason why.
Thank you. Thank you. Would others like to, it looks like Dr. Inouye, you'd like to, that way? Or are you going to, he's good.
はい、ですね、まず工程法に記載してあるような試験方法、同じ方法を使っても実際にラボによって結果が違うということはよくあります。ですから方法をしっかり決めるのも大事なんですが、トレーニングをしっかりするということも大事ですと思います。
Well, let's say a method is described in the pharmacopoeia, the different method, the same method in a different lab, and there may be different results. So on one hand, it is important to define the method for sure, but what is even more important is to get the trainings done right.
Absolutely, that's a very important point to make sure. Yeah.
in Japanese そうですね。やはり検査する場所によって結果が違ったり、であと培養法のどれをチョイスするか、培地をどれをチョイスするかで結果が変わってくるというのは実際にありますので、そういうところはかなり難しい問題になっているとは思います。
I agree, and sampling different spots within the same structure, the differences may be different, and which culture method, which media, depending on those variables, the different results may be obtained. So there are the difficult aspect.
Thank you. And yes, I think for all decision making, repeatability of your results and understanding that change and believing that change over time is what's actually in the water at that moment is extremely helpful in good decision making. So I think whether it's the training, it's the sampling, it's the consistency of how a method is run, that all play a role in this. I have promised we want to make sure everyone has time to get to the poster sessions. There are many more questions. There are some, again, that came in online, and I know that there are more in the audience, but I want to say a huge thank you to each of the panelists for participating today, in particular to Dr. Fauché for participating at crazy times of the day, but to all of you for participating. And I'm sure the panelists will stay around for just a couple moments afterwards if you have individual questions for them. So, thank you very much.